I want to read a scripture that God's putting in my heart right now. We read it a few weeks ago, but we kind of had the giggles over some of the names in this chapter. To be honest, we were a little distracted. So I want to read it again because it's a very important chapter. It's Isaiah 10. Woe to those who make unjust laws, to those who issue oppressive decrees, to deprive the poor of their rights and withhold justice from the oppressed of my people, making widows their prey and robbing the fatherless. What will you do on the day of reckoning when disaster comes from afar? To whom will you run for help? Where will you leave your riches? Nothing will remain but to cringe among the captives or fall among the slain. Yet for all this, his anger is not turned away. His hand is still upraised. Woe to the Assyrian, the rod of my anger, in whose hand is the club of my wrath. So what is he saying right there? Woe to the Assyrian, the rod of my anger, in whose hand is the club of my wrath. That he's using the Assyrian as the rod of his anger and the club of his wrath. I send him against a godless nation. I dispatch him against a people who anger me, to seize loot and snatch plunder, and to trample them down like mud in the streets. But this is not what he intends. This is not what he has in mind. His purpose is to destroy, to put an end to many nations. Are not my commanders all kings, he says? Has not Calno fared like Carchemish? Is not Hamath like Arpad, and Samaria like Damascus? As my hand seized the kingdoms of the idols, kingdoms whose images excelled those of Jerusalem and Samaria, shall I not deal with Jerusalem and her images as I dealt with Samaria and her idols? When the Lord has finished all his work against Mount Zion and Jerusalem, he will say, I will punish the king of Assyria for the willful pride of his heart and the haughty look in his eyes. For he says, by the strength of my hand I have done this, and by my wisdom I have understanding. I removed the boundaries of nations. I plundered their treasures. Like a mighty one, I subdued their kings. Okay, remember that this is the same thing that happened with Nebuchadnezzar. God is using... I posted a video yesterday talking about how God uses the devil. I know that some people don't like that idea, but it doesn't change the facts that God is using the devil to punish, to deal with, to build, to, destroy. He is using the devil. The devil is just a pawn. The devil is being used in order to accomplish God's will. He doesn't have any power, but he's delusional in thinking that he has power. So you might hear him say things or feel him say things to you like he has power to destroy you or he has power to do something, override God's will. He doesn't. And when you understand that, and you understand that God has all power, then you just turn to God and whatever his will is. I mean, I'm having to do that right now in a really painful situation, circumstances, and just basically submit that whatever it is that you're going to do, you're going to do. It doesn't matter how I understand it. You'll bring me to understand. I don't deserve anything I have right now. So holding on to whatever I think I'm supposed to get, or I think he has said, if he does something different, then I just got to go over there. That's where I'll rend my heart. So God is making a point that he's using the Assyrian as his rod. He's using the Assyrian in order to bring judgment and destruction. And then he turns on the Assyrian, who seems to think that he did that all by himself, all by his power and his so-called sovereignty. So he says, as one reaches into a nest, so my hand reached for the wealth of the nations. As people gather abandoned eggs, so I gathered all the countries. Not one flapped a wing or opened its mouth to chirp. It's the attitude of Babylon the Great in Revelation. I'm not a widow, I'll never mourn. But see, God says that he's the one who sets up kings and he's the one who deposes them. That's what we learned in the book of Daniel. No one has power but God. Does the axe raise itself above the person who swings it, or the saw boast against the one who uses it? Think about that for a minute. God's created us. How would we think that the creation has risen above the creator? And if we can't do it, neither can Satan. The only power we have ever had is power that God gives us, which means that we're not the producer or the possessor of that power. And the same goes for Satan. If God is fulfilling his will, then he's using each as a tool. And at the end of it, at the end of all that, and that's whether you're righteous or you're wicked. At the end of all that, if you've chosen him and you've chosen to be used for good, then you'll receive your reward. And if you've chosen wickedness and to be used for wickedness, then you will receive your punishment and your destruction. So we have to choose wisely. Does the axe raise itself above the person who swings it, or the saw boast against the one who uses it, as if a rod were to wield the person who lifts it up, or a club brandish the one who is not wood? You see how ridiculous that sounds? It sounds ridiculous. Like an axe is raising itself above the person swinging it. The saw is boasting against the one who's using it. A rod is wielding the person who lifts it up, or a club brandishing the one who's not wood. That's all very ridiculous. These are tools that are lifeless without the person giving it life by moving it. Is it not the same with God? We are lifeless unless God is moving us. He is fulfilling his will. Therefore, the Lord Almighty, will send a wasting disease upon his sturdy warriors. Under his pomp, a fire will be kindled like a blazing fire. The light of Israel will become a fire, their Holy One a flame. In a single day, it will burn and consume his thorns and briars. Okay, so when we read Revelation, we read about the trumpets, and he's talking about a third of the grass, a third of the earth, a third of the trees. These are going to be burned up, and a third of the creatures are going to die in the sea, and blah, blah, blah. Is he not using the same kind of symbolism here? The light of Israel will become a fire, their Holy One a flame. In a single day, it will burn and consume his thorns and his briars. Do we understand that he's talking about the wicked and those who've turned away from him? Or are we literally thinking that he's become a fire and he's mad at the thorns and the briars? So we should understand the same symbolism in Revelation. The splendor of his forests and fertile fields it will completely destroy, as when a sick person wastes away. The splendor of his forests and fertile fields. Is he talking about a literal fire is he talking about Texas right now that's on fire? No, he's talking about his people. He's using that symbolism the same way he's using the symbolism in Revelation. The splendor of his forests and fertile fields it will completely destroy, as when a sick person wastes away, and the remaining trees of his forest will be so few that a child could write them down. Is he mad at the trees, you guys? No, he's mad at his people. In that day, the remnant of Israel, the survivors of Jacob, will no longer rely on him who struck them down, but will truly rely on the Lord, the Holy One of Israel. Now, look at what it says. In that day, the remnant of Israel, not all of Israel, not those who've been broken off of that olive tree. A remnant will return. A remnant of Jacob will return to the mighty God. Though your people be like the sand by the sea, Israel, only a remnant will return. Destruction has been decreed, overwhelming and righteous. The Lord Almighty, will carry it out, the destruction decreed upon the whole land. Therefore, this is what the Lord Almighty says. My people who live in Zion, do not be afraid of the Assyrians who beat you with a rod and lift up a club against you, as Egypt did. Very soon, my anger against you will end, and my wrath will be directed to their destruction. The Lord Almighty will lash them with a whip, as when he struck down Midian at the rock of Oreb. And he will raise his staff over the waters as he did in Egypt. In that day their burden will be lifted from your shoulders, their yoke from your neck. The yoke will be broken because you have grown so fat. They enter Iath, they pass through Migron, they store supplies at Michmash. Okay, now you can see why we had the giggles over these names. And it's so contagious. Once one person starts laughing, then everybody starts laughing, and you just can't get it under control. They go over the pass and say, we will camp overnight at Geba. Ramah trembles, Gibeah of Saul flees. Cry out, daughter Gallim. Listen, Laisha. Poor Ananoth. Madmenah is in flight. The people of Gebim take cover. This day they will halt at Nob. They will shake their fist at the mount of daughter Zion, at the hill of Jerusalem. See, the Lord Almighty will lop off the boughs with great power. The lofty trees will be felled, the tall ones will be brought low. He will cut down the forest thickets with an axe. Lebanon will fall before the mighty one. A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse. From his roots a branch will bear fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the Spirit of counsel and of might, the Spirit of knowledge and fear of the Lord, and he will delight in the fear of the Lord. He will not judge by what he sees with his eyes, or decide by what he hears with his ears, but with righteousness he will judge the needy. With justice he will give decisions for the poor of the earth. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, with the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. Righteousness will be his belt, and faithfulness the sash around his waist. The wolf will lie down with the lamb, will live with the lamb. The leopard will lie down with the goat. The calf and the lion and the yearling together, and a little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear. Their young will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like the ox. The infant will play near the cobra's den, and the young child will put its hand into the viper's nest. They will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. In that day, the root of Jesse will stand as a banner for the peoples. The nations will rally to him, and his resting place will be glorious. In that day, the Lord will reach out his hand a second time to reclaim the surviving remnant of his people from Assyria, from Lower Egypt, from Upper Egypt, from Cush, from Elam, from Babylonia, from Hamath, and from the islands of the Mediterranean. He will raise a banner for the nations and gather the exiles of Israel. He will assemble the scattered people of Judah from the four quarters of the earth. Ephraim's jealousy will vanish, and Judah's enemies will be destroyed. Ephraim will not be jealous of Judah, nor Judah hostile toward Ephraim. They will swoop down on the slopes of Philistia to the west. Together they will plunder the people to the east. They will subdue Edom and Moab, and the Ammonites will be subject to them. The Lord will dry up the gulf of the Egyptian sea with a scorching wind. He will sweep his hand over the Euphrates River. He will break it up into 7 streams so that anyone can cross over in sandals. There will be a highway for the remnant of his people that is left from Assyria, as there was for Israel when they came up from Egypt. And also, by the way, as there was when he brought them out into the promised land, he dried up the river Jordan, which was at flood stage at that time, dried it up so that they could cross over, and then it went back to flood stage. So that language, we should understand this language. We should understand what he established and why he's saying there's going to be a highway for the remnant of his people. They're going to have a way to cross over to safety and to the promised land. In that day you will say, I will praise you, Lord. Although you were angry with me, your anger is turned away, and you have comforted me. Surely God is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid. The Lord himself is my strength and my defense. He has become my salvation. With joy you will draw water from the wells of salvation. In that day you will say, give praise to the Lord, proclaim his name, make known among the nations what he has done, and proclaim that his name is exalted. Sing to the Lord, for he has done glorious things. Let this be known in all the world. Shout aloud and sing for joy, people of Zion, for great is the Holy One of Israel among you. A prophecy against Babylon that Isaiah son of Amos saw. Raise a banner on a bare hilltop. Shout to them, beckon to them to enter the gates of the nobles. I've commanded those I prepared for battle. I have summoned my warriors to carry out my wrath, those who rejoice in my triumph. Listen, a noise on the mountains like that of a great multitude. Listen, an uproar among the kingdoms, like nations massing together. The Lord Almighty is mustering an army for war. They come from faraway lands, from the ends of the heavens, the Lord and the weapons of his wrath, to destroy the whole country. Wail, for the day of the Lord is near. It will come like destruction from the Almighty. Because of this, all hands will go limp. Every heart will melt with fear. Terror will seize them. Pain and anguish will grip them. They will writhe like a woman in labor. They will look aghast at each other, their faces aflame. See, the day of the Lord is coming, a cruel day with wrath and fierce anger, to make the land desolate and destroy the sinners within it. The stars of heaven and their constellations will not show their light. Okay, when does that happen? That happens at the end of the 45 days before Jesus comes. So we know when he's talking about this is going to happen when the resurrection comes. Just so we have our timestamp, we understand where we're at. I will punish the world for its evil, the wicked for their sins. I will put an end to the arrogance of the haughty and will humble the pride of the ruthless. I will make the people scarcer than pure gold, more rare than the gold of Ophir. Therefore I will make the heavens tremble, and the earth will shake from its place at the wrath of the Lord Almighty in the day of his burning anger. Like a hunted gazelle, like a sheep without a shepherd, they will return to their own people. They will all flee to their native land. Whoever is captured will be thrust through. All who are caught will fall by the sword. Their infants will be dashed to pieces before their eyes. Their houses will be looted and their wives violated. See, I will stir up against them the Medes, who do not care for silver and have no delight in gold. Their bows will strike down the young men. They will have no mercy on infants, nor will they look with compassion on children. Babylon, the jewel of kingdoms, the pride and glory of the Babylonians, will be overthrown by God like Sodom and Gomorrah. She will never be inhabited or lived in through all generations. There no nomads will pitch their tents, no shepherds will rest their flocks. But desert creatures will lie there, jackals will fill their houses. There the owls will dwell, and there the wild goats will leap about. Hyenas will inhabit their strongholds, jackals, her luxurious palaces. Her time is at hand, and her days will not be prolonged. The Lord will have compassion on Jacob once again. He will choose Israel and will settle them in their own land. Foreigners will join them and unite with the descendants of Jacob. Nations will take them and bring them to their own place, and Israel will take possession of the nations and make them male and female servants in the Lord's land. They will make captives of their captors and rule over their oppressors. On the day the Lord gives you relief from your suffering and turmoil and from harsh labor forced on you, you will take up this taunt against the king of Babylon. How the oppressor has come to an end, how his fury has ended. The Lord has broken the rod of the wicked, the scepter of the rulers, which in anger struck down peoples with unceasing blows, and in fury subdued nations with relentless aggression. All the lands are at rest and at peace. They break into singing. Even the junipers and the cedars of Lebanon gloat over you and say, now that you have been laid low, no one comes to cut us down. The realm of the dead below is all astir to meet you at your coming. It rouses the spirits of the departed to greet you, all those who were leaders in the world. It makes them rise from their thrones. All those who were kings over the nations, they will all respond. They will all say to you, you also have become weak as we are. You have become like us. All your pomp has brought down to the grave, along with the noise of your harps. Maggots are spread out beneath you, and worms cover you. How you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations. You said in your heart, I will ascend to the heavens. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the mount of the assembly, on the utmost heights of Mount Zaphon. I will ascend to the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to the realm of the dead, to the depths of the pit. By the way, this is something that Satan has been doing since he's been here. This is not a story of him rushing God's throne in heaven and then being thrown out. That's stupid, and it's not true. I don't know where that came from, but it is not true. It is not in the Word of God. Those who see you stare at you. They plunder your fate. Is this the man who shook the earth and made the kingdoms trouble, the man who made the world a wilderness, who overthrew its cities and would not let its captives go home? All the kings of the nations lie in state, each in his own tomb. But you are cast out of your tomb like a rejected branch. You are covered with the slain, with those pierced by the sword, those who descend to the stones of the pit. Like a corpse trampled underfoot, you will not join them in burial, for you have destroyed your land and killed your people. Let the offspring of the wicked never be mentioned again. Prepare a place to slaughter his children. For the sins of their ancestors, they are not to rise to inherit the land and cover the earth with their cities. I will rise up against them, declares the Lord Almighty. I will wipe out Babylon's name and survivors, her offspring and descendants, declares the Lord. I will turn her into a place for owls and into swampland. I will sweep her with the broom of destruction, declares the Lord Almighty. The Lord Almighty has sworn, surely as I have planned, so it will be, and as I have purposed, so it will happen. I will crush the Assyrian in my land. On my mountains I will trample him down. His yoke will be taken from my people and his burden removed from their shoulders. This is the plan determined for the whole world. This is the hand stretched out over all the nations. For the Lord Almighty has purposed, and who can thwart him? His hand is stretched out, and who can turn it back? This prophecy came in the year King Ahaz died. Do not rejoice, all you Philistines, that the rod that struck you is broken. From the root of that snake will spring up a viper. Its fruit will be a darting, venomous serpent. The poorest of the poor will find pasture, and the needy will lie down in safety. But your root I will destroy by famine. It will slay your survivors. Wail, you gate. Howl, you city. Melt away, all you Philistines. A cloud of smoke comes from the north, and there is not a straggler in its ranks. What answer shall be given to the envoys of that nation? The Lord has established Zion, and in her his afflicted people will find refuge.